Welcome, everyone, to the third Divine Masculine Roundtable. We've got new guests with Brandon Lapierre and David Giventree. David, Brandon, welcome to the Divine Masculine Roundtable. Welcome, Seth. Welcome, Michael. Welcome, Ezriyah. So happy to connect and really continue our conversation and our unfoldment of love. I really felt, and as I was sharing with you prior to the recording, I really felt that what we created in the last Masculine Roundtable was an incredible field of love with authenticity and vulnerability. And I want to continue to magnify and unfold this even further. So, as a way of moving forward now on these Divine Masculine Roundtables, and I encourage everyone watching to follow along with us. I'd like to open these roundtables with a prayer and, more of an exercise of going into one's heart. So, as we go into our heart, we begin to really speak from our heart. And as you're listening and going into your heart, you're receiving from the heart. And so I'm going to start this particular roundtable with a prayer, and it's Gandhi's prayer for those that know the prayer of Gandhi. And moving forward from that, I'm going to encourage you gentlemen, you brothers, to, if you feel compelled to contribute. I'm going to wait a few minutes, and when I feel that everyone's contributed or felt compelled to contribute, I'm going to start my singing bowl, and then Seth is going to start singing and finish this particular. I guess it would be an invocation of some sort for this particular roundtable. How does that sound with everyone?
Beautiful.
Okay. So I invite you to close your eyes. I invite everyone watching, I invite everybody to close their eyes and begin to receive your breath. And follow it as it goes further down. Push it down as far as you can. I offer you peace. I offer you love. I offer you friendship. I see your beauty. I hear your need. I feel your feelings. My wisdom flows from the highest source. I salute that source in you. From this moment now, we are working together for unity and love. And as you take those words into your ears and allow them to ground, begin to breathe a little slower and a little deeper. And as you begin to breathe a little deeper and slower, focus on the area of your heart or your chest area. As you breathe through your heart a little deeper, a little slower, and when you feel the time is right for you, introduce the emotion of love. Unconditional love. Divine love. Begin to breathe in through that heart and that emotion. And begin to radiate outside of your body after giving that love to yourself. And as you magnify that love embodiment, that divine love embodiment, begin to push that field further and further and further out until you encompass the whole universe. And slowly come back. When you feel the time is right for you and you are compelled to contribute, please move forward.
I'd like to honor all of the elements, the earth, fire, all the waters that sustain our life, and the air that we breathe. Thank you.
Everything that separates us or causes the perception of division in our conscious awareness of self, others, and reality as a whole, may whatever that is, may that dissipate so that each of us individually and together recognize and are able to witness each other as a collective unified field, something that we are all connected to through our heart. May us have empathy, care, compassion, and love for each other to the highest degree possible, just as we would have for ourselves when we're in a complete state of balance and wholeness.
Oh.
I also will invite us all to take that love in our hearts, bring it down through a grounding cord at the base of our spine, all the way into our Mother Earth, all the way to the center of our Mother Earth, imbuing her with unconditional love and gratitude as well. Oh.
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 I would like to call upon the source of all illumination and allow this fifth dimensional frequency to align with the diamond heart of Gaia and allow our love within our hearts to be illuminated in the fullness of expression of the sacred souls that we are.
Oh.
Oh.
Expansion for all of us here as divine beings.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was incredibly powerful. So as we begin our discussion today, I want to talk about surrender. What does it mean to surrender from a male body perspective? What does it mean to surrender? And then associated to that, as I feel as we unpack, is the feelings and acknowledging feelings. Because I think as a generality, men as a whole, different aspects of the life cycle, and we all get wise essentially at some point in our lives, where in order for us to be complete, we do have to recognize our feelings and what they mean and what they're trying to tell us and how they serve us and how they allow us to grow. So the floor is open. Surrender. What does it mean to you?
Could you, when you say surrender, to me, there's many different levels and types of surrender. Is there a specific form of surrender that you're talking about in reference to kicking this off, or?
Whatever it means to you is the right thing. I'm not going to contextualize it. I just bring forth what's in the consciousness right now, and that's what needs to be expressed.
Well, I was thinking about surrender when we were doing that meditation just now. And just like Seth mentioned, the first thing that comes up is there's many levels of surrender. There's surrender on the small scale. There's surrender in what people think of as the idea of surrender. And then there's like the city of surrender. There's the spiritual mastery of surrender. And what does that entail? And how does that differ from one's idea of it? And so just thinking about like a typical completely masculine way of this meditation we're doing, where you're expanding yourself out into the universe, you're pushing yourself forward. That's a very doing way of expansion. Well, a more of a surrender way might be to realize that the expansion is already there, and you simply open up and allow yourself to surrender to that expansion and allow it to flow through you and to be recognized in you. So it's a completely different way of allowing what's there to already be inside of you and to recognize it inside of you. So that's a way of surrendering to that expansion. And that is one difference between the masculine way of pushing forward the action and the doing. But when you really look at it, talking about the blending of both, the encompassing of both, the mastery of that is accepting as both. So you're accepting this expansion, you're surrendering to the expansion. At the same time, that will prompt you to do whatever you need to do. That will prompt you to be in the right direction that you're trying to be. So that's where like the balance of both comes into, because it's not just surrender and that's it. It's not just being the expansion and that's it. It's being all that you're meant to encompass. It's being all that you're meant to resonate at, and taking action on that. And that action actually, when prompted, is part of the surrender too, because you'll notice that nudging, that pushing, where spirit's trying to call you into your purpose.
Well said, Brandon.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love what you said, Brandon, because it encapsulates a lot, and it made me think, like, almost in this terms of trying to simplify this for different listeners, people who are trying to come to terms with this or understand it or surrender to it, it's like you said, the universe, life as we know it overall is in a state of expansion. It really is, it's expanding. But human consciousness, when we're stuck in the past, you could say, or the belief that I'm this person having this human experience and that's all that I am, then we're not aware of this expansion that really is the nature of life itself. So when we surrender who we think we are and what we think this life experience is based upon our perception of the past, then that expansive nature of our own awareness becomes innate. It becomes natural. It just becomes self-evident. And to me, I love that idea. Like, that's, in many ways, that's like the simplest form of surrender for anyone, because it feels like it encompasses many different layers and levels of surrender ultimately.
There really are so many different layers and levels, and so many different things you can do with it. And part of the idea that I like to encompass in that is that everything that can be created already has been, and time does not exist. And we in this body is just a flashlight in a dark room. Right. The room is already there. Just as the building is already there. There's just like everything that can be expanded already has been. There's the infinitesimal nature of reality. And we were just here experiencing a small portion of it in a way that our minds can wrap itself around. And so thinking about it in that way, you can just surrender yourself into the life experience that you're trying to attain, because it's already there. And so that's part of that shifting realities from one spot to another. You can try to really push really hard to get to that space of resonance, that alternate reality that you're trying to get to, or you can surrender into the frequency and begin to encompass and embody that frequency.
One of the things you're talking about, Brandon, that I love, and Seth touched on this too, and I want to tie in what Zizi's asked before we started recording, was how do we represent as divine masculine in order to allow women and feminine to accept surrender? And what you're talking about, Brandon, to me, I would call that healthy surrender. What most of the men and people in our society are doing is what I would call toxic surrender. One of the things you talked about is the doing first, and that masculine energy of doing what's necessary to, for instance, get that hurdle out of your way, and doing everything physically masculine energy that you can. And then at that point, when you've done all you can, then you surrender to a higher source. And that's when the magic starts. That's when that magic happens, where that hurdle now is eliminated. What oftentimes I see happening is people saying, well, I've got a hurdle in the way, I'll just sit on the couch and surrender without any doing first. And that's the toxicity that I'm witnessing other women in my sphere get really upset at men and masculinity about. So I just want to caution us all to take Brandon's guidance and do what's most lovingly required to eliminate that hurdle. And then at that point say, okay, I've done all I can, let's surrender this. And the results are magnificent, I believe.
Go ahead, Brandon, please. Brandon, please.
Well, I was going to say, I think you can begin with the surrender as well. The moment you encounter the problem, the moment you feel that, like, that twist in your energy, you're like, what? And recognizing that what is that subtle vibration that I'm feeling? You surrender to that vibration, and in that moment of presence, you can begin to recognize what's there and begin to shift it. And so doing all you can from the beginning, or surrendering it and doing what is necessary along the way. So I think that's part of the shift as well. We don't have to do in order to get to the surrender. We can begin with the surrender. And I think that's part of that energetic mastery, is to recognize that. There's a couple things that I've recognized along the way in both my own experience and studying other other masters and teachers and healers, in that there's a couple cities or a couple of virtues that goes along with every healing, every miracle that I've ever witnessed. And that's part of that is surrender. It's acceptance, it's allowance, it's release, it's surrender, it's trust, it's forgiveness, and it's non-judgment. So when those 7 virtues are encompassed, then that really allows for the healing or the miracle to unfold, no matter what it is. So part of that is the surrender of the problem, surrender of whatever you're holding on to energetically, saying, I must fix this, I must attend to this. And then when you release that and you realize that you can let go of the I-ness and you can encompass the whole of the divine in that problem, in that experience, in that whatever it is with you, then that is what opens the door for the divine teaching in that moment, to show you what's necessary, to show you that there's nothing really that you need to hold or do. You just need to follow the steps. You just need to follow the guidance that's given in that moment, because that really is the teaching. It's not the doingness to figure out the problem.
When I feel surrender, the first thing that comes to my heart is acceptance. And in that acceptance, there's allowance. And I can only speak from my own experience, because 1 week ago, I had to do something that I completely surrendered, the hardest thing I could possibly imagine, by walking into a room and a beloved grandmother who is choosing never to surrender, who is choosing never to let go, and has alienated her whole family and her own grandson, to fully accept what is already within our field and our neutrality and our 0 point. And that is love. I feel when we can surrender to love, then it dissolves everything before us. And in that love, it's that infinite power that's beyond words that gives us that opportunity to truly feel. For when I grasped her hands and could feel her pain, her lack of surrendering, all the things within a 100-year-old body, and allowed myself to completely go to my heart and surrender all of my judgment, all of the energies that I know on a planetary and individual ascension of inequality, injustice, unfairness, and the pains that were going through me. When I just surrendered and I went completely to my heart, that's when I could feel the pure magic of letting go, allowing, and feeling the ultimate love that is here. And I know right now what we're all going through individually and planetary. We're dissolving, we're letting go, we're allowing. And I feel that what we all know within the individual masculinity within us and femininity within us, it's letting go of the duality and the polarity and coming back to what we know is oneness. And I feel that, to me, has been one of the biggest awakening experiences in the art of surrender, is really letting go of everything that we're seeing right now, dissolving, dismantling every belief, every limited condition, every element that has kept us in separation, and come back to love. And when we feel that love and we're able to express that love, then I feel it takes us beyond surrender. It takes us into an energy that connects us all. So, thank you.
Thank you.
So what prevents us from surrendering? I mean, I agree with everything that's been discussed, and it seems so simple in that all you have to do is to surrender. What are the impediments from a male perspective in allowing that surrender, allowing that acceptance?
You know what?
Go ahead.
Can you guys hear me? Aloha,
Yeah.
brothers. So I'll say this. Usually I try to get up early. I woke up a little bit late, but right on time, so to say. And I get up, I jump out of bed, try to be like Batman of the Kristen Nolan version, do my push-ups or whatever, get my body going, guzzle a bunch of water, head to the restroom. And this morning I woke up and didn't do all those things, but I didn't make my breakfast. And I was thinking, man, I should eat something ahead of time, but no, it's better to tune in. And so I'm getting my breakfast right now, and I think it's even better in getting to listen to you, brothers, and opening my heart up and my being and receiving not just the wisdom of your words, but the vibration that's guiding that wisdom. And it just feels good. And so I'm thinking of surrender in the journey that I've had with surrender in two ways. There's the guidance that you may get from a parent, a friend, just someone who you look up to, who's experienced this and can speak to you and say, okay, here's the time when you just need to relax and chill, and you take that advice and you try to experience it yourself. And then the other side of that, which has been spoken to, is when you exert so much of your energy and you come to a point of exhaustion, and then there's no choice but this, you don't have the strength to do anything else. And then there's the grace of just witnessing, because you've exhausted yourself out. Maybe we've done this all in sex. That's could be an easy example until you learn to kind of cultivate that energy and move that around and work with it in a different way. And I just think that some of the impediments have been either not being taught and not seeing the value in that surrender, or not having experienced it and having rolled in the manner that's quote unquote toxic, and that avoidance, or just bypassing in such a way to where you don't take those steps to get to that point. So there's a discipline I felt in my life that's needed to move forward in a way to be willing to bring myself at sometimes to that exhaustion and say, okay, this is it for me. Now I relax and allow. Or saying, okay, I'm going to discern in this moment and be open to acceptance and just receive. So I decided not to make the breakfast and be open to this moment. And I thank you for allowing me to receive.
Oh,
Aloha, brothers.
It sounds to me like Ezriyah was describing how the process works. And to answer your question, I believe that there aren't enough of us modeling that behavior to build trust. Once we all individually go through that process 3 or 10 or 30 times, at a certain point when we master or at least experience it, then there's a certain degree of trust that we know that we can get out of bed and not do our push-ups and not have our breakfast, but still we're guided to be in the right place at the right time. And so I think, to answer your question, that the missing ingredient is trust, and that comes from repeating and demonstrating that the process actually works. But we all have experienced, once we feel that magic and those dots get connected, or that hurdle is we transpire through our situation, then the trust is there.
so I love what you said, David. It's absolutely correct. But that trust is usually contained within positive reinforcement. How many of us, allowing the vulnerability of trust, go out there, surrender, and then get smacked or perceived smacked, right? In some way, shape, or form, right? Whether it's judgmental, whether it's toxic words back, whether it's toxic action, it's reinforcement coming back to the brain, and in some way it battles the shadow side of us, or trigger points, and that's something that we all personally have to work on and not reflect and project back onto other people. But it's a delicate dance between the surrender, the trust, and the faith in moving forward, regardless of what's coming into the field, right? That's actually the work in mastery. And I think I alluded to it before, where irrespective of what's coming to you, the walls of your heart are always down and surrendering to that process and being informed of what you need to do personally, I need to do personally, as you surrender, to get into that unity consciousness, that communion with our fellow human beings, whether it's another male or another female, from a physical perspective.
It's a great question, and I believe what you're describing is what makes us a spiritual warrior. That knowing that we are on the correct path, and this is the process that's worked through the millennia for all the masters, and that's the guidance we're giving, and we will persevere, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying that's the process.
Well, but that's you're right again, though, David. I think the fact is our society has always taken avenues of being of ease, right? So intuitively, we all human beings have guidance, inner guidance of what's required. I firmly believe that in my knowing, and we all choose. We all make a decision every single day. Do we choose in fear or do we choose in love?
Right.
And when we choose in love, as you say, those things that are required to be in that love field isn't always easy. It's a challenge sometimes, but that's the reward at the end of this, right? That's the reward as you traverse through that. You surrender to love.
I think there's something very special to coming to a place within yourself where you decide to love the process, even if you veer from that on the journey, but deciding as if the process was a being itself, which quite possibly it might be. You know, the same process, I love you. And that opens up the door, even it just being heart open to recontextualize the things that occur on the journey. Whether you go from recontextualizing to falling in love or choosing love to recontextualize, but to end up in that center point. And I also feel like that's the importance of us beginning to and holding this connection as men as well, men and beings, but for the masculine, if anything, because that's been lacking in a lot of men beings, and masculine, as I've seen it growing up, is not trusting, not only in the process, but trusting in one another. You know, having that trust within yourself to be able to see trustworthiness within a person and to work with that trustworthiness at whatever degree it's, you know, exhibiting itself and expanding from there.
I have to say, in my own experience, it seems like the impediment to surrender or to living in accordance with the higher self or the potential that I know is there is really the conditioning of my past. When I live and I do certain things, it's like when I stop and I observe it and I start becoming conscious of my unconscious thoughts, beliefs, behaviors, actions, the things that have happened to me in my past, I have to ask myself, how much of that am I projecting forward into my now and my future? And when I'm really honest with myself, I'm like, wow, I'm doing that a lot. Because when I stop doing that and I calm down, I get into a heart coherent space and I'm not thinking about Seth of the past or anything of that nature, I'm just being exactly what I am, then suddenly surrender is just it's an easy process, essentially, because I got out of my own way. I overcame myself. But it's like the practice of doing that and being committed to doing that is what imbues me with the trust that I can keep doing that, you know. And for other people, if to some degree we have to, or I mean, to all degrees, maybe we have to take the initiative to really work on overcoming ourselves, our conditioning to the past, the belief systems that others in the world, both knowingly and unknowingly, instilled into us. And we do that by surrendering, and continuously doing it. It's like we're making a new habit out of being in that surrendered state, being in that augmented state. And the trust just comes when we're like, wow, I can do this. And if I get out of alignment and things happen, I can get back in it. And every time I get back in it, I liberate energy. I liberate the past. I liberate the parts of me that were stuck. And, you know, it's like David said, it's not easy, but it's really simple, I feel, when we look at it from an observational perspective and, you know, a karmic perspective, forget it. We don't need to simplify it, but I mean, to complicate it. But I like to look at it as like, what can I do right now? And it really comes down to that. How much am I being ruled by my past? And when I choose to not let my past be what's determining my now and my future, I feel amazing. And potential is just innate. So.
Absolutely. I notice the same thing. Everything carried forward from the past. And when you react and act from that space is a distortion from your inner truth. And it's everything that encompasses that. It's your heritage, it's your lineage, it's your belief systems that you were taught. It's the things you were taught through your experiences. And so you're sitting there in front of another, and whatever they're projecting towards you, and you react and you feel that space in your heart kind of tense up, that's you reacting from that place. And when I get in those moments where I feel myself tense up due to a situation or an experience, I often sit there and kind of either in my mind or just energetically kind of ask, like, what would my higher self do? What would myself without this body do? How would that experience this moment? And then I feel that distortion as I release and surrender in that moment melt away, and it shifts. I'm feeling all the shifts of my past in that moment, in that experience, kind of release. And then when I fully allow it in that moment, whatever comes through for that person, sometimes it's something shared, sometimes it's something withheld, but whatever it is in that moment that I feel called to share or experience, and it comes through, it's always perfect. But I have to have that surrender in order to be that divine perfection experience through.
Oh.
And what I'm grateful for all of you, and Ezriyah, you nailed it. This is medicine for all of us to share, is that I really feel we are all beacons of light. And when we fully allow the divinity of our light to come through us and be the fullness and presence of just being, just sitting on my paddleboard yesterday and witnessing nature and watching everything before me as if I wasn't myself, but I was just amongst it all and just being in that presence of it all. No push, no pull. It's just this complete, even flow. It's like when riding a wave. I feel there's this magic, that there's this automatic, universal flow when everything is aligned, becomes this beautiful dance. And right when I try to control, right when I try to push, then I feel there's this loss of alignment. And it always brings it back to me that, you know, life lives you, we don't live life. And by letting go of that control, which I recognize in this mind, in this egoic nature, and the judgment and conditions and programs, then it allows me just to be in that presence. When we're in that presence and allowing, I feel there's this automatic sense of surrender, because there's no longer surrender. We're just allowing that divinity of light that's coming through us. And to me, what has helped me on my journey is each morning the medicine has been first thing in the morning just to connect with that divinity. Call in the elements, call in the directions, call in the angels, call in the masters, and really allow that to come through me as I surrender completely into that divine. And when I surrender into that divine, wow, it's like I just melt away everything that wants to push or pull, control or fight. And then it's just that beingness, that presence that we all have, and the beauty that each of you are expressing right now, that just touches my heart, because this is the medicine that fills me, because each of you have the gifts to share that and give these beautiful aspects that I feel we all need to hear, because we can all relate to them. So thank you, brothers.
You.
I'm interested. I mean, this is a beautiful conversation, but I'm interested for those men that want to take a move forward, that don't know how what steps to move. Because I know within my life, when I was in that mode where I had the cognizance that not all was well and I needed to surrender, but I had no idea how to begin to surrender, because that's a foreign concept to me, because my life was all about control. The jobs that I had were controlling other human beings, quote unquote, as a supervisor, director, whatever you want. It's always about the outcome. From the moment I opened my eyes until I closed my eyes was controlling and orchestrating my life. And that wasn't working for me. It brought a great deal of disharmony. And I recognized that, and recognized that needed to change. But I had no idea how to go about doing it, because surrendering is like a massive, it's inconceivable. How do you surrender? What are the first steps that we can maybe discuss with individuals that want to surrender but don't know how to begin? Specifically men, but women as well. What can you share?
I think that process, there's no one right way to do anything, of course. Right. For some people, it's working up to the point where they can experience that fully and truly. And from that, have a gauge to move themselves from. And for others, it's beginning in smaller chunks and experiencing in smaller ways and building up to this crescendo, this place where they can have that expansion and that city of the surrender. And so on smaller chunks and smaller scales, sometimes what I'll do is, and there's many ways to describe it or word it. Like Byron Katie says, what is it like when you think the thoughts that you're thinking, right? And so you examine yourself, you examine your body. What is it like when I hold this thought? What is it like when I have this experience in me? And then what is it like when I don't have it? And you just imagine yourself without it. And notice the shift in either case. And when you notice the contrast, that contrast allows you the experience of surrender. Well, if I let it go, then I can have this experience over here without it. If that feels better without it, then I can let that go. And for me, in other ways, I've built myself up to the process of this surrender. So I was going to a ceremony, and the ceremony, every day for a month, I prayed. And every time I have one of these ceremonies, I always work myself up through prayer and meditation. And I start to really pull in that divine guidance until I can have that moment where I'm completely set aside from myself and let go of everything to let the divine in. And that I experienced the surrender. But I also had a starting point way prior in my youth when I was 17, and where the divine just kind of wrapped itself around me. And that was not necessarily a moment of surrender, but it was just a moment of that happened that allowed me to kind of refer back to along my spiritual journey. And that was basically, for those that haven't heard this story before, a friend of mine I was 17, a friend of mine had asked me to come talk with him. And so we drove up to the top of this hill, and had this bottle of wine, and he started sharing his problems with me. I could tell he was down, and I started kind of talking him through it. I said, this is another way of seeing life. This is another way of seeing your experience. And at the end of it, he shared, he's like, thank you very much. You really helped me out, and you really changed my mind about things. And I wasn't going to say anything, but I was planning on killing myself this evening. And so that feeling that just kind of welled up inside of me, I was really grateful that I was there. But it was when I was driving away, suddenly this thing came inside of me where I felt all of the divine wrap around me, and it just brought me the tears, how incredibly powerful and beautiful it was. And it was love like I've never experienced ever before, and I didn't even know was possible. So for me, like, I always look back at that experience knowing what is possible, what it's possible to feel like. And then when I move forward, I look within myself on what I need to release, what I need to move through in order to bring that more fully back into myself. And so all of these other places and ceremonies and things that I've done, I recognize through the process that anything that keeps me outside of that, and this is obviously what I've learned along the way, because for a long time, I didn't have that trust. I didn't have that trust because I had this place that was so beautiful, and then I felt lost. And nothing I did, I could find my way back there. And it was because of all the things I was holding on to. All the hurt, all the pain, all the beliefs, all the things I was holding on to that kept me in the darkness. And when I let go of those, when I surrendered those, then I finally found my way back. And it wasn't through any religion, it wasn't through anything, but right here. And that's what did it for me. And so that was my step-by-step journey and bit-by-bit process to get back to this place of really encompassing and understanding that surrender piece. And it was honestly a bit of both. It was building up to it, and it was also chunk by chunk, because as I was recognizing all those little pieces that kept me away from it, I recognized the need to work with that little piece right there that was in that moment, in the now.
Wow. Oh.
Oh.
Now,
Or when you look at the masses and you look at men overall and what prevents us from being able to surrender with ease, I think personal forgiveness is a really important key, because so much of our past happened in a way where we weren't even aware of it. So you could say we were unconscious to a degree, and this happened for most of us. So in the process of becoming aware of what you were previously unaware of, men especially might start to feel the guilt and the emotions and the things that they suppressed or held down because they didn't know any other way. We didn't know any other way. It just happened that way. And so realizing that, okay, I wasn't necessarily conscious of what happened then, but I'm conscious now, or I'm becoming conscious now. So I don't have to hold on to things. I don't have to continuously project feeling bad about what happened in the past into my future. And so really finding it within yourself to forgive yourself for whatever you did or whatever happened to you, and let it go so that it's not such a personal thing, but instead something that was put right into your life from a greater perspective to teach you what you needed to learn so that you could grow. I think the more men work on learning to forgive themselves and being proactive with doing that, this idea of surrender, to no matter what level it might be, gets easier.
I think.
Go ahead.
Oh.
No, Michael, please go ahead.
I just want to thank you, Seth, for bringing the piece of forgiveness, because it's such a power that I feel within the feminine, within the masculine, when we can really forgive, when we can really allow, when we can really let go. There's such a love that is expressed. There's such this element of deep understanding. And in that forgiveness, I believe it, as you said, that it starts with ourselves. And underneath that, it starts with loving ourselves in that, because sometimes we don't know how to forgive ourselves. And part of that journey has been a big one, part of just the pains that I've felt, through several past years of death upon beautiful transformation, beautiful rebirth, beautiful energies that come before us, of how much we can forgive another that's teaching us to forgive ourselves in the emotions and the teachings that are coming before us. And so I just want to appreciate and just bow down, because forgiveness to me has been really a theme that I really is allowing the feminine and the masculine forces to come together within ourselves and also within our populations, even by forgiving the words that we choose to use, the actions, the media, the news, like really just going deep within and forgiving it all. Because I feel when we can forgive it all, then there's nothing to fight anymore, and it's complete surrender. Thank you, brother.
Thank you. Can I send some love to both of you guys, Michael and Seth? I think the forgiveness is key. One practice that I picked up, I was actually doing it, but then I went and got certified and spent some time acknowledging it, is the Ho'oponopono practice, in which, you can speak to your own self and the divinity within yourself and come back to that remembering and telling it that I love you, that I'm sorry for, what I have forgotten about the grandeur, the good, the love that you are. Please forgive me, asking for that forgiveness, and then thanking. You can do this even with yourself. It's really a practice of cleaning with oneself, but forgiveness is so key. And so it just feels good to have that served up on this breakfast platter of goodness. Thank you, brother.
And I would actually go in as well, in that it all starts with self-love. If you don't have self-love and all acceptance of loving all parts of your being, I don't know how you can begin to radiate the love anywhere else. And similar to the Ho'oponopono, the new method I've discovered and becoming a practitioner of that is the I love you me method. And it's similar to the Ho'oponopono, but there are steps where the first step is really connecting with the breath. Connecting with the breath. The breath is such a simple process that we've lost complete disconnected to it. I know I had when I started practicing it. But receiving the breath and grounding the breath, that's the first step of acknowledging yourself and moving through all of that. Forgiveness is another step. It's such a beautiful process of unfoldment and enlightenment. And it all starts with self-love. I really believe it starts with self-love. How many of us have a love relationship with ourselves? Now, that seems somewhat narcissistic, right? But I really believe it starts with us, in that you have to love all parts of you before you can become that illumined individual, or that functional individual that you can begin to lead, as it were.
I so agree with you. And it's funny that we were like taught to believe that self-love that you cultivate, that beautiful, like sincere journey within self, can be also labeled as narcissistic, but yet the narcissist hasn't really touched upon that love within their self.
That's right.
So I think this is a wonderful thing to cultivate. Thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, and I think that's the toxic relationship between the divine masculine and feminine, when narcissism in a way is one that takes, that the one that continually siphons in order to feed oneself. And that's the toxic relationship. I'm talking about feeding yourself first, and when your glass is overflown, then that is then given to everyone around you, including the divine feminine.
Even to the point of recognizing, it's like we were speaking to before, that I'm already fed. This is what I love. Every time you mention taking it back to the breath, I can't help but just inhale and just feel so grateful because I'm already fed
That's right.
with that, you know? Yeah. Oh,
And I think, really simply too, there's self-love from a selfish perspective, but then there's also self-love from a selfless perspective. And when we're so focused on who we think we are, according to who we've been, we're focused on the selfish perspective because we don't know any better. It's just what we know, it's what's been happening. And so we continue to perpetuate it. But it's in connecting, like from a real basic level, like even the idea of love and like you're connecting with your breath and you're choosing to feel and generate elevated feelings from within yourself. And you're making that a priority before anything else. And for me, that's the practice, that's the habit. And as long as I continue to do that, then no matter what triggers, no matter what obstacles, no matter what roadblocks come up, I'm able to face them with much more ease and grace. And then it's interesting because it's in that selfless self-love that I notice the women around me appreciate tremendously, because a lot of men have this idea that to love yourself and to be selfless in love means that you're giving up your masculinity, right? This is such a common male perspective in our society. Like, oh, to be loving and gentle and sweet is to be a pussy, to be weak. A lot of men believe that, when it's actually just the opposite when one has really worked on grounding it in and embodying it, because you feel more complete, you feel more whole. So in the beginning, in the process, there's like, okay, you can feel how there's different levels and layers and magnitudes to our own polarities, but with this continued self-love, with viewing love from a selfless perspective instead of a selfish perspective, you start to become more whole, and those imbalances just work themselves out.
That's love without, I see that as love without conditions, love without reason. That truly is unconditional love. And that's part of my prayer and mantra is, Creator, teach me how to love myself like you love me. And there is no reason for that, right? It just is. And that part of that narcissism comes from that place of wounding. So it's not from the same place. It's from that, I need this hole to be filled in something else to fill it. But loving without reason, that from that unconditional space, it just is. It's loving all of creation. It's loving yourself just as Creator loves you. And when you embody that fully, love myself as Creator loves me, then you share that out and you expand that out, and other people feel that, because there is no reason for that love to be there between you and another. That's when they can also feel more whole and fully accepted.
I hope.
Well said, Brandon.
I love you, brothers. Let me just say that. Seth, you're primordial water, straight up. Boom.
I certainly believe he opened up something. So please go ahead, Ezriyah.
Oh no, I just feel good. I feel like my heart's expanding just in this conversation, and I started watching The Matrix again.
Just watched that the other day.
Yeah, I feel like I think it's
ago.
an appropriate movie to return to. A good documentary. Yeah. So there's this one part in the movie where Neo's just getting ready to jump on the board, get his programs, and the one Dozer's brother, I forget his name, but he's like, Neo, I just want to say, I don't know if you're aware of who you are. He didn't say that, I'm paraphrasing, but he's like, man, if you are who Morpheus says you are, right now it's just, God, it's an exciting time to be alive. And I just felt like, if I'm like, for what I'm experiencing in this group right now, it does feel like an exciting time, despite all of what we're getting, in the construct. It is an exciting time to be alive for me because of you, brothers. Thank you. So what's being spoken of, and just looking at the configuration that's occurring right now, feels good.
Oh.
And in the spirit of what Ezriyah is saying, it's like when we're talking about creating a better, brighter world, men, especially, I mean, women too, but men, according to the old programs, or the toxic masculinity is some of the words been using here, there's this idea that we have to compete with one another or one up each other, or, you know, like we've been conditioned to think like dog eat dog. That's what so many people think. And even those of us who know better, we still have men in our lives who still feel this way, even though they know it's not really serving them or anybody else. So I think coming together as we are, talking about these things, showing that men can love each other and support one another. And, you know, again, sometimes finding that balance, and I hope I'm not over talking. I don't want to do that, but, you know, essentially it's that. It's like supporting one another in an equal way so that we can set an example of, okay, everybody's going through a different part of their own journey, but there's a unifying thread that connects us all. And if we can get beyond where we think we are in the journey and connect with one another from that place, we become a lot more whole and a lot more powerful together. And that's why I love this group. And that's what I feel that it's doing in my life, and, you know, that it has the potential to represent for others who watch this.
Oh,
Oh,
so well said, brother.
speaking of that unified thread, one way I can tell we're all tapped into that, and there's so many times during this conversation while I tap into the awareness and then somebody starts speaking on it. So I'm sure you all felt the same thing. There was one point, Ezriyah, you started talking about Ho'oponopono. I had the very same thought at that moment, and then you started speaking about it. And it was like going into that that love for self, and how I look at it is looking back at myself down a timeline and seeing all the little distortions along the way, all the little regrets, all the little pains, all the little things that I wish I would have done differently, and starting to do that Ho'oponopono towards myself. And you started speaking of that very same thing.
I like it. I love it. It's like you know, doing theta healing or people heal in the quantum realm, and I'm seeing the thread, the common thread between so many of these modalities.
Oh yeah.
Ancient, quote unquote, ancient modalities, right, along our continuum, and then, you know, just what's present here and what's unfolding here. Even like I was on the tip of the tongue of my mind, if I could use such a term, to speak to competition, and then boom, primordial water Seth hit it. And I just think that's so important, because I see this now. So we see that as a masculine, even when we're in an unhealthy state, we've created this competition that hasn't served us. And then our sisters have grasped onto that in many efforts to, you know, when they speak to, I've heard many women be like, I'm tapping into my masculine, but what they've described is actually trying to tap into what we're trying to release as an unhealthy way of being. And then they burn themselves out from the organs on outward. And so I come to this place now where I've realized, okay, my journey is to cultivate the women around me. What does it mean to be a husband? You know, and it's like, okay, to cultivate that land, to pour my light upon them, to take them like this, you know, and hold them close. It's one of the things I got to do with my mother before she died was, you know, I had this practice with my wife, and then I thought, okay, let me do this with my mom one time, because I had a double date. I'll make the story as quick as possible. Before my wife, my last wife was my wife. I've been married twice, by the way, you know, or was my partner. She entered into wifeness as I entered into husbandness with her, because I didn't own her. And, you know, we went on this date with my parents. We're walking downtown Evanston, Illinois. And my ex-partner, she goes, well, let's play a game. And I'm like, oh boy, because, you know, she's just meeting my mom. So I'm like, hope this game's good. And she goes, what? Let's just say, if you could be an animal, what animal would you be? My mother's always loved elephants, you know, the majesty of elephants. And she surprised me, because when she answered, she said, I would be a teacup chihuahua. And I thought, like, there's a hurt that I felt when she said it. And then it came to mind that last time that I got to spin with her, because her answer, when I said, Mom, why would you say teacup chihuahua? You always love elephants. I always bought her elephant gifts ever since I was little. And she goes, so I could be in a little nook and be carried in a purse. My mother was super masculine in terms of how she went about things, working so many jobs. And so I put her in the nook of my arms and put her close to my heart. You know, that last time that we got to spend together, I literally picked her up and I was like, "You've never been held like this, Mom. Come here." And she goes, "What?" And I picked her up and I just rocked with her. And then she resisted for a little bit, and then she just put her head on my shoulder and let tears come down. And we rocked together. You know, she surrendered. But it's taken me coming to this point of knowing, like, I need to create a space for my partner to surrender, because they're not doing that, because they don't feel safe. But I had to surrender to that softness. So when we speak of that being part of, you know, being the cultivated male heart warrior, so true. It's so true. And I feel like as you look at the text, say the Tao Te Ching, it pops up, you know, in whether it's being told to be like water, or the attributes of water in and of itself upon the rock. This is the feminine. Know the masculine, but keep to the feminine. And I really appreciate having that step into my awareness and seeing it.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, brothers.
David, you have a lot of thoughts. I can tell you're ready to share.
Well, thank you, Aziz. I go back to your original question. How do we as masculine, how do we practice surrender when you come from a corporate world where you're in control? And I'm listening to all you beautiful men say exactly what I'm thinking. So I feel like there's not really a lot I need to say. Like Brandon said, right before Ezriyah talked about Ho'oponopono, I was thinking about my own forgiveness process. And so we've all answered that question. And I want to just expand further. The process that we're going through right now is one where all six of us have got a certain degree of experience in practicing surrender. And yet in our society, it's very rare. The models that we see in society, for the most part, are the old paradigm of in control, etc. And one of the things Brandon said, which I think is so important, is that we don't have to do it all at once. We can chunk it down and just do a little bit at a time. I think the healthiest way to do that is, like you've all eloquently said in your own ways, pour as much love into that situation that Spirit put in front of you right now as possible. And when you're through loving the situation as best you can, then you can surrender. And then you move on to the next situation where you accept it, pour as much love into that situation as you can, and then surrender and go on to the next moment. And we might practice that hundreds or even thousands of times per day. And that's the process that all of you in your own way are very eloquently expressing. And at a certain point, the magic clicks in, doesn't it? And we realize through that experience that at the end of the experience or the end of the day, we feel invigorated. We feel embodied by Spirit. We feel like, wow, something fabulous happened today, and we were a part of it. And through the repetition of that, it becomes a habit, it becomes a lifestyle of us to be loving in the moment, present, and then surrender. Let's see what next exciting experience Spirit can bring to us so that we can be accepting and loving and surrender and onward and onward. And that's it. Like I said earlier, it's not easy sometimes, but it's quite simple. That's it.
I think in my experience, there's a certain threshold that you cross. You know, I think as you begin to open up this work, this journey of healing, being whole, as it were, the first steps are the biggest steps. The first steps are the ones that require the most amount of work. The first steps are the ones that really define you as a character. Are you a spiritual warrior or not? Because those are the ones, in my experience, that have always knocked me on my ass. You know, have always, you know, have just leveled me, completely leveled me. And I always reflect on what happened, what's real, what's not real, and how would I do that differently. To me, the importance of healing that and being whole and connecting in a meaningful way with other human beings is the journey. It starts with a self-love, starts with a healing, and then connecting with everyone else. So I encourage everyone as they begin these journeys, to David's point and to the other brothers here, I know that you've all had those experiences, is perseverance is a quality that you begin to cultivate through that. Whether you get negative or positive reinforcement, because in my view, there is an unburdening. So when spirit enlivens you, you feel alive like you've never felt before. But the inverse happens sometimes as well, where you become so demoralized on what the experience has been that you begin to question the reality of what you're doing. Certainly I did. And that's really working through the shadow side, working through the elements of myself that required illumination, that required healing, that required caressing and holding, that required love, right? It's only when I began to do that work, and believe me, I'm not done doing that work, I find new elements as I dive deeper and deeper. True mastership is always working within oneself and releasing the light body. And so that's the work. And it's when you cross that threshold, as I began to say, the work becomes much, much easier. It's still a challenge from time to time, but the joy that is around you, the field of joy, the field of love that you begin to release and attract and magnetize makes it all worthwhile in whatever comes to your way. At least that's been my experience.
Oh,
Here.
That's beautiful. When doing shadow work, like you said, a lot of people who might be curious about the stuff that we're communicating and talking about here would look at it and be like, okay, they're just bypassing. They're all happy and smiling and they feel great. And they're just bypassing something that this shadow work, when actually it's the opposite. Most of us have gone really, really deep into what those quote unquote shadows were. And it can be very helpful for those who are struggling with coming to terms with what we're suggesting here. For me, I've gone through many dark nights, and I've, to the degree where I didn't know that I would ever make it out of them. Yeah. And yet I always somehow did. But I found that the mind, the ego, the human perception, because it's so conditioned to live in the past and perceive things the way it always did, it wants to understand what has happened and what's happening. And when you know that, it really can't understand it from a linear level. You have to just go full quantum or just let go or surrender, and in order to be able to, be imbued with the capacity to be able to perceive at these greater levels. But I know for me, and this might help a lot of the men and women who are listening, when I look back at like, why did I have these qualities in me? These like competitive, these dark qualities, these things that were really causing harm to me and others just in the way I embodied them, was I had to be really objective with what happened to me as a kid growing up. And this quote unquote system, and David mentioned it, it's like this corporate system. This is why I want to say it too. We, for the most part, were born into a world where we've been conditioned to compete with one another and, level up and one up one another, so that we can kind of be culled for a corporate workplace that essentially is looking for who's the engineers, who's the physical laborers, who, they're essentially trying to figure out who's going to do what by letting the herd figure itself out, cull itself out. Who's the bullies? Okay, those are the guys at the top of the ladder. Who are the ones being bullied? Okay, we're going to keep them in the back. They're going to work on the computers. I mean, it's amazing to look at all this stuff from an objective viewpoint and realize, and it may not be valid for everyone, but I know in my own experience, when I looked at that, I'm like, oh my God, like it wasn't my fault. It wasn't any of our fault. It's just what happened. And as soon as we choose to stop identifying with it, to the degree that it's holding us back, the more that release and that expansion of light body, of this miraculous energy that's animating our being, becomes more whole unto itself. So my point in saying this is being aware sometimes of the things we weren't really aware of in the beginning can help, you know, and it's that simple. We're part of a system that wants us to be a certain way, but we know that we aren't necessarily made for that. You know, we're made for a greater purpose. And
I appreciate you, Seth, for sharing that, because I really feel, and what we're all experiencing right now is a dissolving and dismantling of that old system and that old way. And I just remember growing up and just seeing how much I had to protect myself from that bullying, from that outer areas. And I really couldn't surrender to that, because that old mindset was like, if I surrender, I'm giving my power away. And I feel there's an old illusion to when we surrender, are we losing something? Am I giving my power away to someone else? And to really step back away from that and seeing what am I being empowered from, and just allowing what's coming to me, and what the gift is that's happening. And it's just been amazing to see society and masculinity and even femininity, and the walls that are crumbling down, and what pieces that we're holding on to create that identity that keeps crumbling and crumbling and crumbling. So part of that surrender, that for those that are listening, and those energies, that when we do surrender, we are empowering ourselves. We're not losing anything. We're not giving something away. We are staying right in our hearts. And I find that it's just, the word itself can be a trigger. I know to many of us, we're aware of that already, but for those that, when they hear the word surrender, that could be a trigger of its own. And so just to keep stepping back from it and observing what emotions come up over that, because I know even my own beloved, a badass fighting warrior that I'm surrendering constantly to give more compassion to, so there's no more fighting, because there's been this mentality of, we're fighting, we're in a war, it's good against evil, it's spiritual, we got to hold on. And at the end of the day, it's, how can I be more compassionate? How can I be more loving? How can I hold that place of just peace and light? And so that being and presence can just exude from who we are. So I always find that reflection of what's happening right now is just so beautiful, what's happening within us and what's happening around us, because I know all of us have our own individual journeys right now, but on a planetary level, it's like, we signed up for one heck of a journey, and it's only getting more exciting. So I'm just proud to be here and just to keep sharing and listening, because it's Medicine Brothers. Thank you.
I just really quick, I would love to say something in response to what you said, because it maybe you guys felt it too, is a lot of the way that the masses perceive the word surrender is of something that you don't want to do, because surrender, we're taught, we go to war, we fight, and the last thing you want to do is surrender. You want to win. And so this idea of letting go and expecting something greater, most people are like, yeah, right, like not gonna happen, So I think a lot of these talks and the way we're communicating is we're redefining a lot of these words and beliefs that people had, and giving new dimensions and new possibilities to them. So I just wanted to throw that in,
Oh, yes. Seth, man, I love you guys. I'll tell you. And also to what Michael just spoke to, like this feeling of surrender, being the opposite of what we want to do. I've been having a lot of, I don't know, you guys, I've been having some discussions in regards to the system of racism, white supremacy, that we're all tackling, this opportunity to look in the mirror. And from what some of my brothers who are on the opposite side, that's still open to discussion to anyone, have been like, why do I need to give up this power? If it is what it is. But it's like you're actually giving up a way of being that's not benefiting yourself or anyone else. Forgive me, someone, did you hear the last part that I said? Which was essentially that, like, being called to step into another way of being, that surrender is a more powerful stance or a more powerful place to operate from in the heart. And so it's not that you're surrendering material goods, or perhaps you are surrendering a way of being, but to step into a greater way of being, a more expanded way of being. You don't lose anything. But it's a difficult thing to see based on the construct. And I recognize that. I have compassion for that as well. Yeah.
I mean, I just reflect on individuals in life that influence the world in the way that they surrendered. I mean, look at Gandhi and the way he surrendered and was a beacon of love. I mean, I look at something much later. Martin Luther King, for example. Incredible surrender into the love. I mean, there are individuals that have laid the pathway. We've just forgotten, and we just need to go back to that, because it's not about division. It is about unity. We need to look at all the illusions that separate us and start having communication and finding the threads to connect us and slowly bind us together as one. Because in the end, we are just one. I'm a reflection of you, and you are a reflection of me. We are the source.
Oh.
You know, for in my own experience, what I found difficult in that surrender was that to surrender was to be vulnerable. And what I learned through my experiences is that openness and vulnerability for myself meant pain. It meant I was in emotional pain. And I opened up myself in one way or another, and I would get squashed. You know, that's what it was like growing up in my family. That's what it was like in certain other experiences of my life. So every time I tried to really express myself in that openness, whether it be in my my love relationship or my home relationship or even my entrepreneurial relationship. So I would open up and I would get squashed. And part of what I learned about the surrender and the difference between what I was doing then and what I'm doing now is the understanding that comes along with it. The understanding that then if I open myself up to this expression, you're bringing all those other distortions along with it, all those other fears along with it, all those other places that need to be recognized and validated along with it. You're bringing your wounds. And when you open up with those places, you're exposing them, but you're doing so with expectations, right? You're doing so with expectations of some of those places being met because you haven't really met them in yourself. So part of this journey towards surrendering is first meeting those places within yourself so that you can surrender to those places. And then you can surrender to this exterior place on the outside, this greater place, and be vulnerable. And that vulnerability really also is an empowerment because you're doing so with the understanding that, or for myself at least, that the divine is there with me completely and supporting me in every way and always. And I have that power, that trust, that comfort, that love of the divine with me, knowing that it's going to carry me through whatever this place is that's calling me forth. And so that's the difference between my surrender then, which was done in my naivety, and my surrender now, which is done in my connection to the divine.
Oh.
You know what it sounds like to me, Brandon, if I can say, it sounds like we're all describing the difference between being vulnerable and surrendering in a toxic corporate patriarchal world, or are we surrendering in a divine balanced world? And I think that's why we're all here talking right now, is how do we do that transformation? Because you're right, in that toxic corporate world, surrender and vulnerability are negative qualities, and yet they're the some of the highest that we would aspire to in a balanced world. And so I can encapsulate, make sure I understand this. When we're in a balanced masculine feminine place and we pour the love that we know how to into each situation and then surrender and create the magic, we're actually in a much higher level and we're connected to source, connected to spirit. Whereas in the past, when we would open up and be vulnerable is when we would get cut down. Am I hearing that correctly? Mm. So I think the big question is, how do we bridge those worlds? How do we work in the healthy world and also assist those around us that are maybe still using the old paradigm as their model and bring that forward, right?
Right.
My experience of vulnerability, for instance, is that the most vulnerable I can be is when I'm in my most power, in my highest power. And I know when I'm in that place, if I were to have an arrow shot at me in that place of vulnerability, it literally would pass right through me. I'm so vulnerable that I can't be attacked any longer. I can't be harmed on any level. So how do we get from here to there, really, is the question, right? And I think we're all discussing it in our own ways. When I'm listening to you beautiful men, bringing in your healing and bringing in your self-love and bringing in the surrender and bringing in your vulnerabilities, that's literally how we do it. And as we achieve those little victories along the way, that's what builds the trust in us so that we know that we're on the correct path. Those are the guideposts along the way that tell us, good job, keep up the good work, right? That's it.
And I think it's a synergistic effect, though, as well, David. The more we do that, we begin to heal, and because divine feminine is waiting for men to rise, waiting for divine masculine to rise. They've been so disappointed. You know, the mistrust that has happened, the division between the sexes over time has been such a battle that the quality of the relationship right now is tenuous at best. But we're at a perfect time right now, and I see us, as men that are somewhat conscious and striving to be more conscious. Certainly, we could all attain more consciousness or be connected to the consciousness, but it's this plea for other men that we have already walked past to say, enough is enough. Lay down your arms, lay down your armor, lay down your shields, and join us in being vulnerable and authentic, because the greatest quality that we can give humanity is our vulnerability and our authenticity. That's what makes us unique. That's our superpower, in my view.
I appreciate David. Thank you, Zisis, and thank you, David, because I feel what I believe in my own heart is what many are really seeking are the new leaders that are leading from their heart. Many before us have been leading from their minds. And when I say minds, their lower mind, not their higher mind, not the consciousness that we know within our hearts. And I feel being presented around many sacred divine feminine, they're disappointed. I feel you, Zisis. A lot of where are the leaders? What leaders do we have in front of us that are really coming directly from their hearts, that are speaking from their compassion, that are sharing directly from their love? And I know that part of this answer is purely to be that embodiment of that. And as we embody that and we be that and we present that, then we see the equality that we're all leaders. We're all beings. We separate the division of what's been the old paradigms and then start bringing in what we already know that we are, source light. And we keep sharing that in our own vulnerability, in our own sensitivity. And I feel one of the gifts that I'm so grateful each of us get to share is that we get to express it, because how many times have we just haven't felt the full expression behind the words, the energy, the feelings. And when ones I can really feel that energy and they can really align with that energy, then it's that unspoken word. It's just the presence of that. And that's what I feel is the answer that's coming before us, is we're able to do that here and now. And the more we show that, others can feel that, and it gives them the opportunity to express it, because that's where I feel that's the missing link, our lack of expression. The more we can express our love and our compassion, even our shadow work, and recognize it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to express all of it, as long as we don't direct it, project it, and blame and shame. But we just allow that in our fullness, because that's what I feel what consciousness is allowing us to be, to rise, to expand, and to allow the fullness of who we are. And that leadership, I feel, is directly from that infinite place, love within the heart. And I appreciate how we all have that unique expression and art that we can share it and allow others to feel it.
Oh,
Beautiful.
the heart has art. Even if you look at the word, within the word heart, there's art.
Mm.
I think it's wonderful that you said that, Michael. Oh,
The earth has heart.
indeed, it does.
Look, earth has heart. Mother Gaia has heart. If it wasn't for Mother Gaia, we wouldn't be here. She gave us our body.
Hmm.
Well,
Back to David's proposal, how do we bring this to other men to help,
it's a good question.
I think we're doing it, right? And I just see two things that become obvious. One is each of us continue to do this on our own, like we've been doing, but maybe almost step into it a little bit more, like do it just a little bit more, not to the degree where we're pushing too hard, but really be that example with as much as we can give to being it. And then by coming together the way we are and sharing like this and opening our hearts to one another and showing that men can live in harmony and support each other and encourage each other. I want each one of you to literally be the best you can be. I want to see your talents. I want to see you shine. I want to see whatever your unique individual blueprint or crystal print or whatever you want to call it. I want to see that come out and be expressed to its fullest, because that makes me feel like, okay, now it's like Michael said, it's like the idea of the law of emergence, right? When you see a whole bunch of fish in the sea and they just all know how to move at exactly the same time, but there's no leader. Right? It's not a top-down or hierarchical phenomenon. It's a bottom-up. Everybody's leading at the same time. They just are in tune with the greater impulse of life, and they know right what to do. And we're like that, with untold potential inherent in us. And that's what we're here to do, is bring that out in one another. So we be this on our own, we set the example, and then we keep coming together and encouraging it in each other, and let that serve as an example to encourage others to do the same or similar or something in resonance with it.
Oh,
Absolutely.
what's been interesting, I was in the beginning of this year, I was prepping to do retreats. I got Lakoji, which is the gathering people, right? On Oahu, the gathering place where I wanted to do the first big one. And of course that changed due to COVID. And so I had to think to myself, do I have the opportunity to continue to create safe spaces in every interaction? And the answer I came to was yes. Like we can, if that little bit that you're speaking to, Seth, is we each have the opportunity with every interaction that we have with our fellow brothers and sisters to create those safe spaces in an aware way with intention.
Right.
And it's a really powerful thing to come to and to experience it, to where, not saying that I succeed at every moment, but it's good to feel like after an interaction that, wow, we both sunk into each other and we were safe and it was good. And I feel so nourished and like I've met another piece of my soul, you know, out there.
Well, and the other thing that I would like to add to this is that most of us that are doing this work, most of us that are in this new age movement, most of us that are leading the way or even being part of the journey,
Yeah.
it's to support those individuals that are garnering. How many times do I see within the community that's quote unquote woke re-traumatize each other because of belief systems, right? And I'm not passing any judgment on that. For me, it's more about you know, whatever is coming and resolving and releasing, that needs love. That doesn't need more judgment. That doesn't need more negativity in some way. This is the way we begin to heal. This is the way, by getting into our neutral point, our zero point, if somebody's experiencing this release, it's not going to be pleasant for those people, for those individuals, men or women. But I find too much that as people are releasing and healing, that's what I call it, we re-traumatize not only ourselves, but the relationship, the individual, and having that compassion and to love it, really, truly love it. And you're not going to get it perfect the first time. It's going to be messy, but having that self-awareness first, that this is what's happening, and feeding that love, and just keep practicing, as David said, over and over and over again, you know, it becomes quite easy after a while. So, yeah.
And I feel, thank you, Zisis. And I feel what the magic of this is right now is we give the permission for others to voice what's within their heart.
Yes.
Us sharing our individual stories, our individual experiences, and even our deep pains. The more we can surrender within ourselves, it allows others to really leap forward. And I love what you said, Seth, because I feel we're all getting the nudge to rise in our own individual journeys. We're all getting that subtle push from the divine, the universe, to say, okay, we've all been brought here for this divine mission. We're all moving through the thick of it, really, right now. So now how can we gently nourish ourselves as our giant heart to expand that while giving the permission to others to rise around us, just in our voice of our heart and our love. And like I said, I feel that example that we're demonstrating right now is going to help others leap forward, and others within our own beautiful feminine divine to share everything that they're experiencing so that we can unite even stronger.
Oh,
I would add to that. I think it provoked something within me, Michael, as you said, gentle. You know, how many of us, when we begin to awaken, begin to realize the truths in life, in the reality that we live? How many of us, and I know I was the one there as well, I was guilty of this. I realized the truths, and I unsheathed my sword of truth, flaming as it is, and began to wave it around to everybody. This is truth. This is truth. This is absolute truth.
Yep.
My egoic self had brought that forward, right? That's not a place of compassion. That's not a place of kindness. That's not a place of gentleness, right? What we need is to be gentle with each other. Regardless of what truth you realize, the truth that one needs to realize is their own journey. Our role is to support that journey. That's it.
I think that's part of the balance between the masculine and the feminine. It's the divine love and the divine wisdom, the divine action, the divine creativity. It's the balance between all of those. And when you're saying, because I did the same thing when I first realized these truths, right? I wanted to go and shout it on rooftops and tell everybody and shout in their ear, like, you don't get it. But when I really drop into the moment, right, of whatever that now is, drop into the moment and tune into that other individual, tune into like where they're at in their space, then I know there's the right amount of what's needed in the right way. And sometimes that's withholding that truth and just letting out a shred to open the door for them. And sometimes it's just recognizing that and holding space for them, knowing that they're not ready to see even the door crack open. They're right where they are. And if you just hold them in that space energetically with that love and that compassion, it invites them to the door.
I hope.
Beautiful. Well said.
Yeah.
So we're getting at the 2-hour mark, and I'm going to invite everyone to bring forward their closing remarks. I think this has been incredibly, again, very heartful, meaningful, and enlightening for me. And I thank you, each and every one. I love each and every one of you. I love each and every one watching with an open heart. Please continue to radiate the love and create a planet of unity. Thank you, guys. But please, who would like to move forward next?
David's
Brothers are awesome.
Love all you guys so much. This has been such an incredible experience. I'm so honored to be sharing with you all, and bless you all on your journeys. You've inspired me, and thank you for your wisdom and your sharing and your love. Thank you.
Aho.
Aho. Oh, okay. Brothers, I just made a noise. Just want to thank you all and just express my my gratitude for this moment. One thing that we spoke to that I thought was important was, we're speaking at what could be considered a high level, and to remember to bring it back for those who are watching, that we haven't lost any of our salt. These are all men who have gone through a journey, who have gone through their, the darkness, the dark nights, the shadows, if you would. And we still continue to do that. So the commitment that we've made is bring on the shadow work if necessary. And we'll continue to do this with compassion for ourselves and for the totality, but we don't shy away from our shadow. And this is not what we're asking anyone to do. It's not, there's love and light here, but there's also in equal quantities, the darkness of the journey that's necessary to cultivate what you see before you. And so no one's asking any, of the brothers who are maybe beginning their journey, we're not asking you to reduce or get rid of your salt. The salt is what gives you the flavor of who you are. That's part of that crystal structure that we want to see manifested in its fullness. We're just saying, let us embrace all of that and bring all of you to the picture, so you can see what it's like to be held by your brothers, and in turn begin to hold not only your brothers but your sisters. That would be my final thought and expression, aside from aloha to you all.
That's so beautiful, Ezriyah. Thank you. Aloha.
So I love you guys so much. I love that I'm here, that you're holding space for me, that we're all doing this for each other. And I'm really grateful for what Zisis was saying, especially at the end, how we each come to our own recognition of truth within us. And that's most pertinent to our own journey. But when it comes to how we handle one another, that's when it's really about us just laying down all the thoughts, beliefs, behaviors, actions, all the judgments, laying that stuff down and really supporting one another, no matter who they are, no matter where they are, no matter what they've gone through. And that, I think, is going to be the telltale sign of how quickly we evolve as a gender, as a polarity, as everything we are and that we aren't, is our willingness to just support each other unconditionally. It's like Brandon said, it is truly about loving without conditions, ourselves, each other, everything. And that's what I feel this group is instilling us all with the ability to do. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, brother. Aho.
I want to thank each of you and all those that are here listening, of honoring the sacred space that we hold for each other, that we feel for each other, remembering that no matter what happens, always to see the light and the love that we can shine on everything that's before us right now. And in that light, in that love, I bow to each and every one of you. Thank you.
Oh,
Yeah, thank you all for being here. It's been an honor and a privilege, and extremely grateful for being a part of this group, connecting with you all. It's not often that I get to connect with this many people of this resonance at the same time and have this kind of conversation. So really grateful to all of you. Love you all.
love you, brother.
Thank you, brothers. Thank you for everybody watching. Until we see each other again in 2 weeks, make love your goal.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Love you, brothers.
Love you.
Aloha.